Today we're going to be talking about why rich people go broke. And I mean, I'm sure maybe some of you guys have seen videos of recent athletes just talking about how 100 million isn't enough money, which is kind of crazy. And
Yeah,
it kind of goes to show like it doesn't really matter like how much money you make. If you don't have a system in place to manage your wealth, you'll still end up going broke, which is crazy, right? I remember a few years ago I was watching a video on like how Shaquille actually made a recent like video on it too as well on how Shaquille O'Neal, with his rookie contract, he spent $1 million in a day.
yeah, that was
And
crazy.
yeah, and he was just talking about how he bought himself a car and his dad a car, and then like he just living large and everything. And he had a conversation with like a mentor, and he said, and he was basically was very disappointed when he looked at that balance sheet, and he was like, "Man, like I need to change."
For sure.
Some people that happens than others. I guess for you, and then like when did you have that realization of just like figuring out like how important budgeting is, regardless of how much money you make?
I would definitely say early on, just right when I had a job, I was fortunate enough to have both my parents in my life, and they were able to help me out, like the roof over my head. So the money that I made, I was keeping it, but I always wanted to save money and like buy a car and move out of the house eventually and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
you definitely have to learn how to save for the future because most people, especially here in America, they'll get, let's say, X amount of dollars a month, and they see that as, I don't want to say the goal, but it typically happens to where they spend it all the way to zero, or and with credit cards even past zero, and it's you're almost starting in the hole for your next paycheck, which is a bad habit that just got to pretty much hit that face on of being able to plan accordingly for the future and for the rainy day, because it seems like that's what really gets us spiraling in the bad direction when we have to replace something on the car or a bill doesn't go through and stuff like that, and then you're kind of behind the eight ball for the next few weeks or months or however long it takes. But making sure that you have proper savings is definitely a key to peace of mind. I definitely want to stress that one.
Hmm. Yeah, and when it comes to just managing money in general and everything, what Shaq ended up doing right when he kind of pivoted to make that change, right? He looked for guidance. Other mentors kind of helped him like save and grow his money because he knew he didn't necessarily have the expertise at that point because obviously he was good at his career playing basketball, but he needed to find someone that was going to be able to manage his money. And the surprising thing is, when I was listening to the interview, he was interviewing like financial advisors that were talking about doubling his money, tripling his money, like aggressive returns. Like we could do this in the stock market and everything. And
Yeah,
he had the discernment to be skeptical enough to be like, I don't know if I want to do that. So at a
yeah,
young
that's
age,
pretty.
that's very a lot of people at that age they wouldn't have the discernment to do that, right? And that's one thing
Yep.
like when I kind of heard that story of Shaq, right? And he ended up going with an advisor that was just kind of boring in a way. Like, we're going to
There
go
we
ahead
go.
and invest in bonds and money markets, get safe rates of return. You don't have to take too much risk and annuities to lock in some guaranteed interest. Like, he went more towards that direction, which is kind of surprising, right? Because when you think about a young person that just like they want to be aggressive, they want to get the highest rate of return, they want to maximize, they want to do all these things. Like, oh, let's do for the moon, and he had
Yeah.
the discernment to not fall for that trap, right?
Yeah, especially being a teenager. I want to say he was still a teenager when he actually got that big contract, and that's probably the reason why he blew through the check and bought those cars. And I know back in the day when he was drafted, it was still like MTV Cribs where you wanted to stun on the next person as far as like the cars and the
Yeah.
crib. And for sure, he got caught up in that lifestyle, but then was quickly able to realize, hey, this is not going to be the best for my financial future.
Yeah.
And I've seen some reports or interviews, I should say, where the bank actually called him and said, "Hey, you're actually in the negative
Negative,
because you spent all your money,"
yeah.
and you never want to get that call, and it kind of puts you into realization of like, "Oh shit, I'm going on the wrong path," and he was
Yeah.
able to catch it real early in his career, and pretty much get the guidance that he needed to, and to make sure that everything was safe. I feel like he went from blowing all that cash to, okay, let me just make sure I'm moving in the right direction. Even if it's small
Yeah.
amounts, let's not hit a home run every time. Let's just get the base hits, and it's been working out for him. So
Yeah. Because
it's a
it's
good
also
success story.
like different asset classes are used for different reasons, right? Sometimes people just get in the mindset of like, I need to accumulate as much money as possible. How can I get the maximum rate of return? But depending on your stage of life, whether you're in retirement stage, whether you got an inheritance, whether you make a lot of money in your career, like someone that's an entertainer, like an athlete, you're
Yep.
more in you want to preserve that wealth because you don't need
Hmm.
to make an extremely high rate of return. And I was actually looking at a survey. It was talking about just financial education in America, right? And it's like 70% of Americans can't answer basic questions on compound interest and risk management, basic risk management stuff, right? Like understanding mutual funds, the difference between mutual funds, stocks, like A grade bonds versus like A grade, like blue chip companies, things like that, right?
Yeah.
At least for him, maybe he did not have the expertise, but he ended up seeking out people that did, that were able to kind of help guide him in the right direction and realize, hey, look, you've already have like multi millions of dollars. There's no reason to take a ton of risks. If we could get a guaranteed rate of return of even 4%, right? Because if you're
Yep.
getting 4% on,
A
say,
few $1 million.
a few $1 million, let's say you get 4% in 100 million, that's 4 million a year, right? So it's like
Hmm.
you don't need to take a ton of risks. And even leaning away from things dealing with the stock market when you have that much money might make sense. Even though the stock market is a great wealth building tool, for someone that's at that stage, it might not make as much sense because you just would rather have a fixed rate of return because realistically, if you're getting $4 million a year, you should live a great lifestyle, right?
Yep.
Like, what would you do with $4 million a year, man?
And that's what I put in the chat. As far as there's phases to the wealth game, and a lot of us we don't start with a lot of capital, so we're in the accumulation phase, meaning the money that we get, we're trying to accumulate as much as we can, and pretty much you're on your way up the mountain, if you will. And on the preservation side, you want to make sure that you're not ascending that mountain rapidly, and that's where you want to make sure that you able to have those safer returns or safer investments, if you will. Make sure that your money lasts your lifetime. You're able to live a comfortable retirement or lifestyle, if you will, because not everybody needs to retire, but be able to live your certain lifestyle, what you imagine it, and hopefully able to preserve that wealth well enough to actually hand it off to the next generation and lead them to a better start than you had. But my bad, I was rambling right there. What was the question that you were asking?
We're just talking about the difference between like, accumulation and understanding those stages. Most likely for most people, right, they're in their 20s and 40s for majority of people, with the exceptions we're talking about, like, obviously the athletes and stuff. You're going to
Yep,
be in the accumulation phase. So being
for
aggressive
sure.
in terms of wanting to start a business, taking more calculated risks, like that's probably the stage you're going to be in if you're trying to grow wealth for yourself in the future. But when you
Uh-huh.
get closer to your 50s, 60s, that's when you want to lean more into preservation, right?
Exactly.
And I don't know if you guys have kind of seen in terms of the stock market right now, in terms of how a lot of these AI like tech companies are getting valuations that haven't even like sold any products or created any products yet. Just the belief of like AI being the next thing, these companies are getting extremely high valuations, and it's like it's a bubble that's bound to pop, right? And if you think about if you're
Yep.
closer to the end of your retirement and there's a drastic crash, 20%, 30%, or whatever that crash might be when the AI bubble pops, right? Are you going to be in a good situation for retirement? And that's kind of like understanding when you have to accumulate wealth versus when you have to preserve it. Because if you have a few million in your portfolio, when you're older, you don't have as much time, so you don't get the time to rebound from the market. So you might want to think about ways to preserve wealth, similar to the way Shaq structured himself, his money in fixed accounts, annuities that are going to guarantee essentially his principal. And some of these accounts don't even have any fees. A lot of people don't realize that you could get 4 or 5% no fees,
No fees. Yep.
and preserve part of your nest egg.
Yeah, and that pretty much goes hand in hand with the accumulation. These are going to be your Bitcoin or the stocks, and they give you tremendous upside, but also, like you said, those could come crashing down at any given moment. And you got to know what phase of your financial journey you're on, whether you're still trying to accumulate, and if you're willing to take the big risk, but also take a larger downside. You got to know what is the potential return for some of these investments, as well as what is the downside risk of a major loss, and what does that look like with the amount of capital that you're working with, as opposed to, like you said, bonds and annuities and stuff like that. These are going to be, I don't want to say boring, but those are going to be more your safe things where you don't really have to worry about it. It's going to be on the back burner, and you already know what to predictably assume you're going to receive.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes like these things are so predictable, people almost want to mess with it. I think it's just human nature. It's like, I kind of want to have a little bit more exciting stuff, even though it's
Yep.
working for them. It's like they just want to mess with it, and it's kind of a human nature type thing, right? So because it's like a question, yeah, am I doing the right thing? Can I make more money? But I mean, the most important thing you have to ask yourself is, what's your goal? Is your goal to have a comfortable retirement? Is that your priority? Like, what is your priority? Are you trying to maximize money? Because maybe if you're trying to maximize money, maybe you should start a business or something like that. Like, just putting your money into an annuity might not do it. But most people, when they accumulate that amount of wealth, they're not really, doesn't really take more risks, right? So,
Yep.
and I kind of want to add on to that point. A majority of people that have built generational wealth, right? After three generations, essentially there's no more wealth to be passed on after three generations. It's all gone. And like, I guess
Hmm.
the question is, like, why do you think that is? That like a lot of people that have accumulated a lot of wealth, maybe like previous families that are extremely wealthy, multimillionaires, maybe even billionaires, why do you think they lose all of the wealth in
For
3 years?
sure, I think it's a similar instant to how Shaq, he got that large payout, and no matter how much money the amount is, you still have to have the knowledge enough to, or the future sense to say, hey, I want to protect this money for a little bit longer than just this year. People just see a number and they go to spending. We're easily able to spend a lot of money, but don't have the foresight for keeping that money into things that are going to make us larger returns. And I would say they pass money down to their next generations without handing the skill over of how they're either made that wealth or preserved it for multiple generations. So that's one of the things to keep in mind. That if you are looking to pass on some type of assets or wealth to the next generation, make sure you also start to prime them to take over the thrones, if you will, with some type of day in the life of, hey, this is how I check up on these assets, or this is how I manage these assets, or put it into an advisor's hand to take that risk over. But the instructions got to come with the parts, if you will.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, put a one in the chat if you're more towards the accumulation phase right now, or put a two in the chat if you're closer to the preservation phase, just so we can kind of see who's kind of watching and understand where you guys are at. And to kind of
Hmm.
add on to that, I'm sure some of you might have seen like Odell talking about 100 million not being enough, which is absurd, right? It was like a recent viral video of he's talking about how essentially, yeah, getting all that money isn't enough for him, right? And he
Yep.
said how 60 million after taxes, and you have to buy this, flex, and all that stuff that like athletes like to do. And this kind of proves back to the point where it really doesn't matter how much money you make if you don't have a system to kind of preserve your wealth. It doesn't matter. It's like you having a cup and you're pouring water into it. Like you could put as much water as you want. It's just gonna come right now, right? It's just gonna drain until there's nothing left, right? Because think about it, right? If you let's say you just put 20 million in an account, you just put it in savings. You just wanted to enjoy recreation, do things like that. Because I understand athletes, they probably want to enjoy life, do things. Understandable, right? If he put 40 million at say for even 3%, you say you got 3%, which annuities they pay higher than that right now. Interest rates are high. Even
Yep.
if he gets 3%, that's $1.2 million he would essentially guaranteed for the rest of his life, right? Put a yes in the chat if you think you would be able to live with $1.2 million for the rest of your life and you wouldn't have to work again. Put a one in the chat.
I'm definitely making 1.2 work for me,
Yeah, it's like
because and it's not only that. When you have a asset like an annuity where it's going to pay you out or generate amount of income for the remainder of your life. Let's say if you do blow the 1.2 in the first year, that money's coming right back to you in the following year to try again.
yeah,
And
it
that's the beautiful thing with something like that, to have the foresight to put it there, and now it's giving you an unlimited amount of chances going forward.
Yeah, the thing that Shaq did that might not even realize, it gives him the ability to be reckless. He could take something as much as let's say, like, he probably had more than 60 million in notice, I would imagine, of how wealthy he is, right? He could probably take 4 million, just blow it into, and just take it, put it into fire and just burn it. It's all of it gone, right? And it's like, man, I spent all that money, and then he still has guaranteed checks coming in because he just positioned himself and was patient enough to put himself in a position to put that money in a place where it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but preserves wealth for himself and his family for the rest of his life. And that's really what it's about.
Oh yeah, for sure. This is just a question for the chat. Let's just say if you guys were to receive a large lump sum, let's just put a dollar amount on it, like $1 million. What would be one of the things that you would for sure put in order for your household or accumulate with that money, just to make sure that you can keep that money printing money for you?
Keep that money working. Yeah. What are some of the things you guys would put your money into if you had like a large sum of money? And people sometimes get this stuff. It's like you'll come across. Sometimes we come across clients that maybe they get settlements, lawsuits, or maybe they get life insurance money, and they just want to say, "Hey, like, how do I position myself to make sure I don't blow it?"
Hmm.
You don't necessarily have to be a deca million or multimillionaire to be able to put yourself in a position to preserve your wealth. It's just a matter of like if you have a solid lump sum, you want to make sure that you don't blow it.
There you go. Invest, REITs, dividend stocks.
Mhm.
Yeah, we were talking about real estate yesterday and how you have to lower your taxes. So that's definitely a good one right there.
Yeah, 100%. And for me personally, yeah, real estate, annuities, that's what probably have my eye on. And for me, I use my life insurance policy as like a savings account. Just put money in it, get a safe rate of return around 5%. And whenever I'm ready to invest into anything, whether it's my business or whether I want to invest in real estate, it gives me more flexibility, right?
Yep.
So I just go ahead, put my money there, and then when I have something that's more lucrative, I just take money out from my policy and just use it.
Yeah, the IUL is definitely taking over the spot of savings account in the bank just to store your capital. And when the opportunity arises, then you could utilize the equity that you built in the policy and then invest. And
Mhm.
if you make returns, you could put more money in the policy and keep making that play go because you get the living benefits of being able to utilize your cash. You get the death benefit, and then also if you were to get sick or anything was to happen to you as far as like illnesses, it also covers you in that sense. So definitely a good one there.
So I like that answer. Annuities, real estate, and a small business. You definitely got your head in the right place. Sometimes people get that money, and there's a funny thing Kevin Hart said when he got life insurance money from his mom, how he's bought a bunch of jerseys. So I don't know if you saw that video, man.
Yeah,
He was
yeah.
talking about, I was like, oh man, he just had a bunch of jerseys. Sometimes when it comes to the education system, it'll teach you about the right things to invest, how to manage your risk, and how to make sure your money lasts and everything. So that people end up making those mistakes. Let's see, we have a question. So how do you find a good team or group of people actually to help grow, protect? I think when it comes to that, it's never going to be one person. Like you're going to have someone that specializes in real estate tax, right? And you're going to have one person that specializes in maybe like accounting compliance, like because might need both, right? You might need the person that's a tax advisor to you, and then also compliance, and then you might need someone who's just like a risk mitigation specialist, like helping you like protect your assets. Like based on your business, what asset should you putting your money in? Should you be taking more risk? Should you be taking less risk? Should you be saving in a way to where you're hedging against market risk, tax risk, kind of like what we're talking about, where you're saving money in a life insurance policy to eventually take risk in your business? So it's a matter of essentially just partnering with different people. And we have different people on our network that specialize in different things. Obviously, we are in the financial services space. We specialize with like high cash value life insurance policies to allow people to have control in their finances, to go ahead and invest in their businesses, make different investments they want to make for the future, and give them control essentially for the future rather than putting the money in an account where they have no control, right? Which is the typical thing where most people do. They just put the money in a 401k, but what people don't realize is you're giving up control when you do that. When you put your
You
money in
add
an
in
account,
partners.
yeah, you're giving up control. And we're moving more towards a society where the responsibility of your retirement is going to be more on you than your employer.
Mm-hmm. That's for
So
sure.
if you ask yourself this question, right? If retirement is my responsibility, why would I want my employer to have control, so much control of the majority of my money, right? Retirement is your responsibility because Social Security is projected to get cut around 2030, 2034, somewhere around there, if you look at the projections for it, because the account is going insolvent. Pensions don't really exist anymore. The 401k, even when it comes to that, like if you're not invested for 5 years, if you end up leaving your job, they get to keep the money that they've contributed.
The
Like you're
match. Yep.
giving them so much and the thing and they're not necessarily going to help give you a stable retirement for your future. So it's really more about taking control of your retirement and realizing, hey, it's my responsibility. I'm in the driver's seat and I just need people that are advisors that are going to help position me in the right way and make the right decisions for myself, my future, my business, and my family.
And just to piggyback off of that, like he said, there's going to be different financial professionals that you reach out to, and don't just reach out to one and have them be like the first and only person that you reach out to. This is going to be your livelihood that you're banking on, so make sure you reach out to multiple sources and pretty much fact check on what one person is saying, whether that be us or let's say like a trust advisor or real estate people. You want to make sure that you're doing your part to make sure that every deal that you go into, you know the worst and best outcomes. So
Yeah,
that's a
because
good
there's
question
always
there.
going to be risks, right? Not taking risk is a risk. So you just need to realize that Like that's just kind of how the game is, right? There's no way to have zero risk in anything. And we're even talking about, guaranteeing your principal and everything. Technically speaking, if you're investing in fixed asset classes, you're at more risk than inflation. So, but there's advantages and disadvantages to every position, right? So just understanding the position you're in and just not looking at it in a vacuum and just being like this doesn't hedge against inflation. There's no reason for me to think about it. That might be true, but that might be not be relevant for your situation. For example, for someone like who's in Shaq's position, he shouldn't care about inflation if he's getting guaranteed income of like 5 million every year. Like, why do you care about inflation if you're getting that much? Like, how much are your expenses going to grow every year for inflation to matter? So that's what I mean. Maybe if you don't have as much assets, like we are kind of saying, if you're in the accumulation phase, if you're in the accumulation phase where you're building your assets, then inflation might matter more, right? And that's when you might have to take more risks. You might have to invest in the stock market. You might have to create your own business. You might have to prioritize accumulation, right?
Yeah, I believe it was Damon Price 46 that asked, and I noticed that he was in like more of the preservation phase. So just depending on what your financial goal is, whether that be to continue to build small returns on what you've already built, or just maintain it, there's going to be different assets that you're going to look into to make sure that that money does last your entire lifetime, and making sure it's actually passed down to your, I would assume, children, or whoever's going to be the beneficiary of those funds or assets. Make sure to get those documents in place, because we never know how much more time we have on this earth, and doing that definitely helps mitigate the risk, if you will, for anything happening in the future. So things like trust, whether that be irrevocable or revocable, you can go some research and see which one's a better fit for you and your family, as far as the taxes and transferring the wealth as far as the assets. But you're in the preservation phase, yeah, you're already up the mountain. You just want to make sure that the money lasts from there.
Yeah. I think there's another comment that wants to set it up to where I can tell what this do. Yeah, I mean that would be like trust planning. Let's say you have life insurance for yourself and you want to make sure that your kids don't blow the money, which is fair, right? You could have the life insurance proceeds go to your trust and have the trust essentially dictate their terms, right? It's like, hey, make sure they go to college. Make sure they put X amount of years into a certain field before they can start a business. Like you get to set the structure to make it less likely for them to blow the money. So we did previously talk about how generational wealth after 3 years, even for multi-billionaires, like they lose all their money. And the reason why is because there's no structure set up in terms of trying to keep the kids honest in terms of making sure they don't blow the wealth. And you can make the trust say, hey, look, you're gonna get you get life insurance on yourself, and then essentially you could have the trust say, hey, you have to get like the trust uses the life insurance proceeds to buy a policy on the kids too as well. It's not even optional. You just have it so
It's
they have life
automatic.
insurance on them, so the proceeds can keep flipping in the sense of once they pass away, the grandkids get money, and then afterwards and so, and you could just have that constant cycle. But obviously, it takes planning to make sure that's done correctly and intentional planning to make sure you do it right. Where you have like a good trust attorney, good insurance advisors that are able to help design the right policy design for you to make that work.
Yep, for sure. It's all can be properly documented to where your restrictions, as well as the provisions and stuff like that, can be documented in your trust, that my kids can't really touch a large portion of their funds until age 30, or until there's a certain measurement that or value that's been met on their end, so then that the wealth can be responsibly managed on their part, or with the trustee, or a wealth advisor. But for sure you can put that and preserve wealth through trust planning. Sure.
Yeah.
Yep, the waterfall method.
Yeah, we're gonna be doing these more often. We're gonna try to do this on a weekly basis. Like this week we did about three. I'm gonna try to do more to just going live and just talking about these financial concepts and everything. But I guess before
Hmm.
we head out, like I guess where can they find you if they have like questions on, insurance planning, financial planning, or anything like that?
Gotcha. It's going to be Anthony Enriquez on all the platforms. Specifically, on Instagram, it's going to be IUL Anthony. You can find me there. Give me a follow, and if you have any questions, reach out to me or Pascal. Would be more than happy to help. We're all on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. So What's your ats for those or your handles for those?
Yeah, me, it's financial underscore ownership for Instagram. And if you look up on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, you'll be able to find me. That's my business name. My name is Pascal Manigat. That's my full name. But yeah, if you have any questions, I've been in the life, health, and retirement space for over 8 years. I could answer probably a lot of questions in regards you might have in terms of just planning in that regard. And we obviously have a network that we associate with that specialize in other categories. So if you're looking for a need or you have a certain need that we can't fill, we could definitely find the specialists required to do what you need done.
Yeah, it was a nice interaction. Thank you guys for showing up. Like you said, we'll be back on Monday. It's gonna be 5 o'clock Pacific. You're Central, right?
I'm Central. I'm in
7 o'clock.
Texas. In
7
California, I'm in
o'clock.
Texas. So it's
seven
still light
o'clock
there. It's
Central.
dark over here now.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Appreciate you. Appreciate you.
Yeah,
Thanks for
appreciate
showing
it,
up
man.
and then putting your comments. Definitely
It's more
it's better
engaging.
conversation when there's more actual questions and hands-on things that we can actually help out with. So appreciate
Yeah.
you guys showing up.
But yeah, yeah. Yeah, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. We'll be going live more often. But yeah, until then, we'll see you guys next time.
Alrighty. Have a good one.